All right, Shabbosai, good morning, good morning. Let us begin. Great daf ahead of us. It's always a great daf. Great daf ahead of us today, beginning by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar. Stephen Terry's in for dedicating Orishim and Joshua this month in memory of Terry's father, Tzvi Hirsch ben Yosef HaKohen. And to thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Shrim and Joshua this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah ben Zechariah and Dina Bas Pesach. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas Lav and Aliyah, and the families in Nechama. Now, also with that, let us begin. So we are up to the Mishnah. Up to the Mishnah. So we'll say 5 lines up from the bottom. 5 lines up from the bottom, Mishnah. So I'll say, so we ended off just yesterday again with a fascinating sugya, just about, well, the truth is the halacha that the Mishnah introduced us to was the concept of kol tuma min hameis, right? Ultimately any type of tuma, to halacha l'maisa, again, a Nazir would go ahead and have to shave, and in other words, or to say differently, any type of tumah exposure which would bring a Nazirite vow to a conclusion and require him to start again, ultimately one is chayiv for entry into the Beis Hamikdash with that same type of tumah. But any type of tumah which would not go ahead and forcibly conclude a neder nazirus, ultimately again one would not be chayiv for entry into the Beis Hamikdash. Interesting, David Flum made a great observation, and he said, I was fascinating that the Gemara does not even go ahead. David, I'm sorry, I meant to respond to this yesterday. The Gemara doesn't even talk about the halacha. Let's say, if you notice, right, by the way, there's no Gemara discussion about the halacha itself. Generally, when you find that there is no discussion about the Gemara, that's because from the Gemara's perspective, it's open and shut, right? From the Gemara's perspective, ultimately, the position of Rabbi Eliezer is, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, is accepted, right? And the argument of Rabbi Meir is not accepted. So that's the halacha, and therefore there's no need for really any further discussion. It's what's called the halacha psuka, just a straightforward halacha. That's why, if you noticed again, the whole discussion of the Gemara was about what? The whole discussion of the Gemara was about which Rabbi Yoshua, or I should say Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya is being quoted over here, is not the Rebbe of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so we emerged from that Gemara with an incredibly profound idea, namely that whenever you have a halacha stated in the name of multiple people, often what will happen stylistically is what? It's kind of like the middle individuals may be lopped off, and therefore, again, the halacha is communicated in the name of the originator of the halacha, and ultimately, again, in the name of the one who's actually conveying it. Okay, incredible. More to say about that, but in Meretz Hashem, if we have time, we'll come back. Says the Mishnah, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Danti Lifnei Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Akiva said as follows, I went ahead and I said over in front of Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'im etzem kisora, shinu metame adam ba'oel, hanazir megalech amagol v'amaso. Supposed to listen to this. Rabbi Akiva said as follows, etzem kisora, let's say if you have a bone fragment that is the size of a barley kernel. Now remember again, there is no tumas ohel by etzem kisora. Let's talk about this before. So if you are under the same roof with a bone fragment, ultimately you do not become tameh. Yet, you can become tameh through maga and masa, right? If you touch a barley kernel of a bone fragment, or you carry it, ultimately, again, you become tameh. And if you're a Nazir, that type of contact would require you to restart your neder nazirus. So when it comes to etzem kisaora, which is not metame ke'ohel, but ultimately, again, causes a Nazir to restart his neder nazirus, so revi is dam. Shumatame adam ba'ohel. So let's say, therefore, when it comes to revius of blood, where ultimately, again, a revius of blood is metame adam ba'ohel, does convey tumas ohel. Eino din she'anazir megaleach amagav amasa. Certainly, again, it should cause a Nazir to have to restart his neder nazirus. So we'll say this is Rabbi Akiva's kal v'chomer. So Amrali, so ultimately again, see Amrali Mazze Akiva. So ultimately, Rabbi Eliezer says Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, what are you talking about? Ein danin kan mikal v'chomer. You cannot make a kal v'chomer from here. And Abba say kal v'chomer from here means what? You cannot make a kal v'chomer based on halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So I'll say another interesting exegetical principle. You cannot make a kal v'chomer from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Now, which one is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai over here? Emir Hashem we're going to discuss in the Gemara. So I'll say, here's what Rabbi Akiva wants to do. Rabbi Akiva wants to say very simply, if halacha l'maisa, an etzem kisaora, a barley kernel-sized piece of bone fragment, which does not convey tumas ohel, but yet, if a Nazir touches it or carries it, causes him to restart his neder naziros, then a revius dam, which does convey tumas ohel, should certainly go ahead and cause a Nazir to go ahead and restart his neder naziros if he touches it or carries it. Rabbi Eliezer says it's a great argument, but you can't make a kal v'chomer from halacha Moshe Misinai. Beautiful. So what happens? Kishebasi Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Akiva says, when I said this over in front of Rabbi Yoshua, Amar Li, he said to me, Yafa Amarta, you're saying good, right? You're saying good. Ela kain amru halacha. But like we said before, you can't make a kal v'chomer from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So we'll say, Rabbi Akiva shot down twice in one mission. A good argument, but shot down twice. We'll say, it's an incredibly profound yesod, which is sometimes what you're saying is right, but it's not correct, right? And this is very important yesod in life, because we'll say sometimes you could be right, but you're really wrong. And this happens all the time. It happens all the time where sometimes what I'm saying is correct, but it's not the right time to say it now. Sometimes what I'm saying could be correct, but it's not helpful for the particular situation. Sometimes what I'm saying is really right, but the person just can't hear it. We encounter this all of the time. And so much of life, I will say, is knowing, you see, there are some people who feel that as long as what they're saying is correct, they should say it. And they get themselves into so much trouble. They have difficulty creating lasting relationships. They have difficulty advancing their own personal agenda in life because, again, they're just focused on, well, if it's right, then I should be able to say it. That's not true. A lot of life situations, you might be right, but don't say it because it's not going to help. It's incredibly profound. Everybody's saying, Rabbi Akiva, you're absolutely, in other words, your argument is a good argument, but you're wrong. Sometimes you could be saying the right words, but it's not correct what it is that you're saying. It's such, let's say, I think as I get older, perhaps one of the most important life lessons. Just because you're right doesn't mean you should say what's on your mind. Incredible yesod. Top of Nun Zayin. Atzim kisa or halacha or revius. Down kal v'chomer. So now the Gemara says, here's everybody is saying the same thing to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, the argument is a solid argument. The problem is you're incorrect because halacha l'maisa, you can't make a kal v'chomer from a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So we'll say, what we now have to figure out is which one of these two halachas is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Are we saying etzim kisa ora? So we'll say is the idea that a bone fragment conveys tuma, not tumas ohel, but maga and masa. Is that the halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Or revius dam kal v'chomer? And ultimately, again, the revius dam conveys tuma. Should convey tuma through maga and masa, and therefore go ahead and cancel. I hate to use the word cancel in today's day and age, right? No, it's not the right. You can't cancel Naziros, right? But the Maisa man, maybe it goes ahead and cancels everything that's been observed up until now. Is that it? Vein dana kavachor mehalacha. O dilma revius dam halacha vatim kisor kavachor. Maybe no. Maybe the halacha Moshe Misinai is the revius dam. So which the Gemara says vein dana kavachor mehalacha. Tashma. Here it is. Atzem kisor halacha or revius dam kavachomer. So I say, interestingly enough, what the Gemara says, no. The idea of etzem kisora, that's the halacha Moshe Misinai. Right? Ultimately, again, the halacha Moshe Misinai is the etzem kisaora. Ultimately, again, that etzem kisaora, that a bone fragment the size of a barley kernel, has the ability to convey tuma, not tumas ohel, but through maga and masa, and has the ability to deconstruct a nazirus. Right? That is the halacha Moshe Misinai. Or revius dam mikal v'chomer, and ultimately, again, the revius dam. Ultimately, again, was the one that we wanted to learn out through the kal v'chomer. Ve'in done in kal v'chomer mehalacha, and therefore, the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa you can't learn out a kal v'chomer based on halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So therefore, again, essentially, the Gemara says is like this: the etzim kisor is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and because of that, cannot be used as the basis for the kal v'chomer. Good. So therefore, again, Rabbi Akiva's logic is sound, but he runs into an exegetical roadblock. You hate it when that happens, right? Those exegetical roadblocks are the worst. Right? So I'll say, so again, he runs into an exegetical roadblock and he simply cannot darshan what he wants to darshan because you can't make a kavachomer from Allah Moshe Sinai. Beautiful. We'll say, Hadjun Allah, Kohen Gadol. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. What a way to start the day with finishing a parak of Gemara. Incredible. Good. So I'll say, so let's go out there. By the way, there's more yeah. Okay, fine. There's more to do. There's more to do in the rush over here, but we'll close that. That's okay. Good. We'll say new parak. New parak. Good. So we finished the Masechta a week from Thursday. We're winding down towards the end over here. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah. Shnei Nazirim. Here's the case. Two Nazirim. She'amar lahem echad ra'isi echad mikem shenitma. Ve'ini yodea eze mikem. Shabbos say here's the case. Two Nazirim walking down the road, right? You have another guy. It's not like a rabbi and priest involved in this also, right? Just two Nazirim walking down the road, right? So now what happens? So another guy comes on, we'll call him Ruvain, right? And Ruvain says, Ra'isi ech mikem shenitma. I saw one of you become tameh, but I don't know which one. Okay, so this is an interesting case. So I'll say, so by the way, the Rush qualifies this. The Rush says over here, if you look at the first Rush in the parak, Beis Nazirim, Shamar Lahem Echad, Umayri Shem Shoskim. Shem Hayu Machishim also, Lahayinam on Kidis Vigdush. Well, I'll point out over here, what's the case? The Rush adds in one very important component. So you have Nazir 1, Nazir 2. They're walking down the road together. Ruvain sees them. Ruvain runs over and says, oh, I saw one of you guys become Tameh. I don't know which one of you became Tameh. They will say, what do the Nazirim say? What do the Nazirim say? They don't say anything. Like, okay, we weren't aware of anything. Because the Rush points out, if they were to contradict Ruvain and to say, no, we did not become Tameh, they would be believed over Ruvain. So the Rush says the case has to be where the Nazirim themselves are silent. And when we say silent, they're just like, we just don't know. We have no knowledge about this. So we'll say, so now you have two Nazirim and a Safek Tumah. So what do you do? Now we'll say, this is a mess, right? This is a mess. Why is it a mess? Because we'll say, that means, now remember, what is Ruvain claiming? What's the nature of his claim? What is he claiming? I'll give you a hint. We just read it, right? What is he claiming? One of you became Tameh, right? We're saying, remember, the claim is not both of you became Tameim. One of you became Tameh. One of you became Tameh. So I say, so what do we do now? So this is actually fascinating. Watch this. So the Gemara says, Megalchin. So they're both going to shave. Umavian carbon tuma, the carbon tara. So this is very interesting. So first of all, take a look at Rash at the Rash for just a moment. Megalchin umaviim la'achar sheyichlu lamid yom shalam. So we'll say the first thing we do is we wait, right? So in other words, what we do is we wait. How long do we wait? We wait till after 30 days. I will say, we're making a lot of assumptions over here. The easiest way to deal with this is that halacha l'maisa is we let them. Let's assume it's a nazirus mu'adas, right? And the two nazirim in question, they had a 30-day nazirus. So the first thing we do is we wait. We let them finish out the 30 days. At the conclusion of those 30 days, megalchen, they both cut their hair, right? They both shave. Umavian carbon tuma, the carbon tara. Watch this. Also, we bring two karbanos, right? A carbon tuma. Now, remember again, the karbanos for tuma, which in other words becomes tameh, are different than the karbanos for the concluding regular nazirus, right? So we bring what we call the carbon tuma and the carbon tara. So the carbon tuma is the type of karbanos that a nazir brings in the event that he counter tumas meis, concludes one neder nazirus, and restarts. We bring those karbanos, and we also bring a carbon tara, as if the nazir was concluding a regular neder nazirus. Now watch this. V'omer, and we'll say, he says, now essentially one of the two nazirim says the following. V'omer, imanihu tameh, carbon tuma shali, the carbon tara shacha. Right, so let's say nazir number one. Nazir number one says, listen, if I'm tameh, then the carbon tuma is mine, right? And Nazir B, right? Nazir B's the carbon tara belongs to you. Vim anihu atar, but Nazir number 1 says if I'm the tar, then I carbon tar shali, then the carbon tara is mine. The carbon tuma shalcha, and ultimately again the carbon tuma is yours. Fine. So I'll say so. That's step 1. So I'll say so again. So let's go through these. Let's go through these steps. Step 1, right? Nazir 1, Nazir 2, walking, minding their own business. Reuven says, one of you became tamei. I don't know who. Okay, fine. Well, so that's step 1. So I should say that's the event. What does it trigger? It triggers a process. What's part 1 of the process? What's part 1? Right? Wait till the end of 30 days. Right? That's number 1. In other words, finish out this, which I will say, by the way, is also such a Musar Haskell. Sometimes in life we encounter a problem, and the reflexive reaction when you encounter a problem is solution right now. No. Sometimes what ends up happening is you take a deep breath, right? And sometimes you have to assess the totality of the situation before you go ahead and act. I'll say it is such a profound yesod in life. We're good. It's good to be a problem solver. But sometimes before you jump and you react, sometimes stop and assess. So over here, stop and assess. Now, in this case, the assessment is, gotta wait. Let them finish out the 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you're bringing 2 sets of karbanos. 1 for Nazir B'tumah, and number 2 for Nazir B'tara. Bring both sets of karbanos. And I will say, now what happens? So essentially, one of the Nazirim kind of becomes the spokesman on behalf of the 2. Essentially, Nazir B'tumah says, listen, if I'm tamei, carbon tumah is mine, carbon tara is yours. If I'm tar, carbon tara is mine, carbon tumah is yours. Beautiful, but we're not finished. The sofer shloshim. Now, both say, how do we know we're not finished? How do we know we're not finished? Because again, remember, one of them is tamei. Now, both say, if one of them is tamei, what does that require? Another 30 days. Therefore, part 2, the sofer shloshim yom, we count another 30 days. Umavian carbon tara. Now, both say, at the end of those 30 days, what do? We bring another carbon tara. Now, both say, you're only bringing 1 carbon over here. Why? Because remember, again, that's all you need. That's all you need. At the end of these 30 days, someone is concluding their Nazir's Patara. So bring 1 more carbon tara. V'omer, and he says, we'll say one guy speaks. V'omer, imani hu atame, carbon tuma shali, the carbon tara shalcha. If I was the tamei, then the carbon tuma that we brought before, that was my carbon, right? That was my carbon. Right, and ultimately, again, the carbon tara shachar, that means the last time the carbon tara belonged to you, the zeh carbon tara si. And now this, the carbon tara that we're bringing now, this is my carbon tara. The maniyu atar, but if I was the Nazir tar before, then carbon tara shali, then the previous carbon tara that was offered was my carbon. The carbon tuma shalcha, and the previous carbon tuma, that was yours. And therefore, the zeh carbon tarascha. And then the carbon that we're bringing now, this is your carbon tara. Beautiful. So I'll say that is how we resolve the case of doubt. Pretty straightforward. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, this is actually fascinating. Watch this. We're going to get into a technical tumah issue. Those are the best. We'll say, watch this. Here we go. Katani, here's the problem. Right? If you look at the Mishnah, Shnei Nazirim Shamar Lahem, Reisi Echamekam Shenitma, Ve'ini Yodeh Eizemikem. I will say, now watch this, but not that type of technical tumah. Watch this. Let's say, here's the case of the Mishnah, right? Nazir 1 and Nazir 2 are walking together, right? Reuven says, I saw that one of you guys became tamei, but what? I don't know which one. Now, both say, we have a suffix tumah. Now, both say, understand something very important. How do you deal with suffix tumah? When it comes to, when I say suffix tumah means we're not sure, is a person tamei or not? How in general do you deal with suffix tumah? So here's what's fascinating about suffix tumah. Everything depends on geography. Where did the suffix tumah arise? So let me tell you the principle. So watch this. V'amai, so now watch this. V'amai. Now, what we're saying over here is Reuven sees, right? It says 2 Nazirim and Reuven. Reuven sees one of the Nazirim become tamei, but he doesn't know who became tamei. So we'll say, so now essentially what we do is we treat them both as suffix tamei. We have to go through this whole process. V'amai. Kol suffix tumah b'rishus hayochid mehecha yafin Allah mesota. Masota boel v'niveles af kol safek tuma birshus hayachid. So we'll say, now watch this. Now watch this. Could go into Ika Beitrei. So it's Avahach, let me just read it. Shnei Nazirim, Vahai, Dikai Gabeon, Hatlasa, Havay Safik Tuma Birshus Harabim. The Chol Safik Tum Birshus Am Sigotar. Okay, we'll say, watch this. It's actually really great because it's our next Masechta is Sota, which is an incredible Masechta, very exciting times ahead. So I'll say, so I'll point out to you is as follows. The concept of Safik Tuma, the paradigmatic example of it, is Sota. We'll say, who's the Sota? Sota is a woman who's been warned by her husband not to be alone with a certain man. Right? I'm trimming down the details over here. Right? She violates the warning. She's alone with the man. She's alone with the man about whom she was warned about for long enough for something to have occurred. And we'll say, so what happens? What happens? She has to go through the whole process of Sota. Right? We take the parsha of Sota, dissolve it in water. She goes to the Beis Hamikdash. She drinks the water. The water tests her purity or chas shalom, her impurity. Fine. So we'll say, now, do we know, did the Sota do anything? Did the Sota do anything? We have no idea. So we'll say, now remember again, the Sota is the paradigmatic case of Safek Tuma. Safek Tuma. Maybe something happened, maybe something didn't. Safek Tuma. Now I will say, Safek Tuma is only halachically problematic if it occurs where? In Rishus Hayachid. Because Sota is the paradigm. I will say, where does the suffix of this Sota come from? Where does it come from? She's alone. It's only two people. It's her, and the man about whom she was warned about. So only suffix Toma Birshus Hayachid generates a halachic problem. Conversely, suffix Toma Birshus Harabim, I will say, how do you deal with the suffix Toma Birshus Harabim? How do you deal with it? Star. It's tar. Suffix Toma Birshus Harabim is called tar. I will say, what's the definition of Rishus HaYachid? See, here's what's interesting. What's the definition of Rishus HaYachid? Two people, private setting. What's the definition of Rishus HaRabim? Three or more people. And we'll say, what's the case of Mishnah? What's the case of Mishnah? Three people. Why is it three people? Because who do you have? Two Nazirim and Ruvain. Remember again, I'm going to say, what's the case of Mishnah? Two Nazirim, right? Nazir 1, Nazir 2, walking mind in their business. Ruvain coming along and saying, what? One of you are Tamei, I just don't know who. Well, now I have a suffix Tuma Birshus Harabim, right? It's a doubtful Tuma in a public setting, right? In a public domain. Three people. If that's Kisabosai, this should be tar. There should not be any process. I was like, no, isn't that exciting? Right? This is a case of suffix Tuma Birshus Harabim. And suffix Tuma Birshus Harabim is tar. What's going on over here? Both say three lines up from the bottom. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, no. Amar Rabba Rafuna. Pa'omer ra'isi tuma shenizraka beinechem. Very interesting. I will say the case is where Ruvain is not standing next to the two Nazirim. Instead, I will say Ruvain is standing at a distance. If you look at the Rush says, Ba'omer, last Rush on the page. Pa'omer ra'isi shenizrak tuma beinechem. Shahaya meruchak mehen dalit amis. Dahashta lo havu ela trey. David suffix tuma b'shus yachid. I will say, what's the case? So interesting. The case is where Ruvain is not standing in proximity to them. Rather, Ruvain is at least Dalit Amos away. And I will say, because he's Dalit Amos away, he's not considered to be in the same Rishus as they are. So I'll say, first of all, right, what do you feel like telling Ruvain? Let's be honest. What do you feel like telling Ruvain? Mind your business. Exactly. Come on, man. Right? Keep your eyes on the ground. Just keep moving, right? Otherwise, but Lamaisa, Ruvain is Dalit Amos away. So because he's at Dalit Amos is 6 feet, and remember again, Dalit Amos also represents its own domain. Because Reuben is more than Dalit Amos away, he's not considered to be in the same domain as the two Nazirim. So he is seeing things from a different domain, but I will say, but essentially, the two Nazirim, so to speak, are alone themselves. Because of that, this is a case of Suffix Tuma Birshus Hayochid, and because it's Suffix Tuma Birshus Hayochid, we have to deal with it stringently, as evidenced by the Mishnah. Rav Ashi says, Deka Nami, we could infer this as well. Diktani, I will say, Amabeis, Veini Yodea, Ezamikem. I will say, the fact that Reuven is claiming over here, one of you became Tameh, and I don't know which one, that in and of itself is indicative they are dealing with a case where he is at a distance. Right? He's at a distance. Sefer Rabbi say, again, I want to say, in general, the beauty of the daf and the beauty of Gemara is on any given day, we are exposed to new realities and new concepts. So first of all, just this idea of Safek Tuma Bershus Hayochid is Tameh based on Sota, and therefore, again, conversely, we'll say Nun Zainu base 57b, first line on the daf. So we'll say, so conversely, Safek Tuma Bershus Harabim, or Bershus Hayochid, sorry, what did I just say before? Safek Tuma Bershus Hayochid will be Tameh, based on Sota. Based on that, Safek Tuma Bershus Harabim will be Tar. But again, the Gemara sets this up as a case where Ruvain, the observer, is at a distance, and therefore, Halacha L'Maisa, this will in fact be a case of Safek Tuma Bershus Harabim, therefore will be Tameh, and therefore triggers the entire process. Incredible. Next. Megal Chinu Mevian. So now we have a very, very interesting case over here. So remember again, let's take this back now. Let's take this back. Let's take this back. So now remember again. So now we've established Ruvain sees Nazir 1, Nazir 2, right, at a distance of at least Dalaramas. He sees that one of them has become Tameh. One of them has become Tameh. He doesn't know which one. So we'll say, so remember again, what's the process? The process is wait 30 days, right? Wait 30 days, and then go ahead and they have to both shave. And remember, we'll say, what is the shaving of the Nazir? What is the shaving of the Nazir? Complete head shave. Complete head shave. Now watch this. Says the Gemara. Va'amai, dilma lav tmeyin inun v'ka'avet hakafa. Oh, 1 second, I will say. So now what you're saying is just shave both of their heads. But 1 second, I will say, what about the fact that halacha l'maisa, maybe one of them, oh, actually, let's take it back. One of them is not tameh, right? One of them is not tameh, and yet I will say what we're doing over here is halacha l'maisa, you're going ahead and shaving their head. And I will say, under normal circumstances, the act of shaving the head is an isra d'oraisa, right? Of hakafas harosh. You're not allowed to round out the sides, right? You can't remove your payas. So in other words, the Mishnah just says, oh, just shave their head. But lamaisa, doesn't shaving the head represent a potential isra d'oraisa? So if you take a look at Rashi, which is actually no, not yet. Sorry. So the Gemara says, "V'amai Dilma lav tmein inun." Maybe one of them is not tamei. V'ka'avet hakafa, and you are performing hakafa sarosh. Amar Shmuel be'isha v'katan. What's the case? I will say the case could be over here that the two nazirim in question are a woman and a katan. I will say now, how does that help? Because remember again, an isha, a woman, is not subject to the halachos of hakafas harosh, right? The din of hakafas harosh is a din in a man because the rounding of the sides is linked to the destruction of the beard. Take a look at Rashi. I'm sorry, take a look at the Rush for just a moment. The Rush says over here, "Be'isha she'ina be'isra hakafas rosh kidarim l'samuch kol she'ina ba'ashchasa ina ba'akafa." Whoever is not commanded regarding the destruction of the beard is also not commanded regarding the destruction of the sides, the payas, right? So Isha, and what's the case of Katan? Abosai, Katan, the Rush says, Shumufla Samochlish. Abosai, now listen to this. The case of Katan would have to be the following case. We spoke on this before. In our Nidarim days, there is the concept of a boy who is not yet bar mitzvah, but able to make binding Nidarim. This is what's called a katan mufla li'ish, which is a right or some sabuch li'ish, which is a boy ultimately again who is mature enough. He's not yet a gadol, but mature enough, namely that he's aware enough to be able to make binding nidarim. Generally, again, this is a boy between the ages of 12 and 13. So again, lemaisa, it's interesting. He's old enough to make nidarim, but yet again he's still a katan. So in that type of situation, he would not be in violation for rounding out of the corners of the head. So therefore, the Gemara wants to suggest that maybe the case of the two Nazirim, where we could just say, oh, just shave their head, that could be a case of a woman who's not subject to akafa, and a katan who's also not subject to akafa. Very interesting. To which the Gemara says, "V'likma bigadol v'akafas kalarosh lo shma akafa." Now, remember again, we actually mentioned this before. Why do you have to set it up that way? Maybe he could just be a regular adult man, but maybe Rabbi say the opinion of the Mishnah holds that akafas kalarosh is not a kafas. Remember again, we spoke about this before. The typical case of rounding out of the corners, Rabbi say, was where what? We're rounding out the corners, but what? Leaving hair on top. maybe there's a machlokes of what happens if a person just shaves their entire head, right? Is that the isser of hakaf or not? So remember again, that is a machlokes. That is a machlokes. Now maybe halacha lemaisa, our Mishnah holds that hakavas kalarosh is not called hakafa. That's not the isser. So the Gemara says, why don't you set it up? To which the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Midalo mokim lahachi shma mina kasaver Shmuel hakafas kalarosh shma hakafa. Now, I will say, here's what's interesting. From the fact that Shmuel doesn't set it up that way, right, indicates to us that what? That Shmuel holds hakafas kalarosh is in fact hakafa. That a rounding out of the entire head, halacha l'maisa, is still the isser of destroying the payas. And I will say, by the way, I'll point out to you, that's how we paskin, right? So we paskin that even if a person shaves their entire head, that is still the isser d'oraisa of ultimately removing payas. Fine. So therefore I will say, so again, just to point out over here, so what you have over here, very interesting, is Shmuel setting up the case of the two Nazirim as a woman and a katan. And therefore, again, I will say, we could just say, just after 30 days, shave your head. What about payas? What about the fact that one of them may not be tamei? Or, say it differently, one of them is not tamei, and therefore they're going to be shaving their head not at the prescribed time. We're talking about isha and a katan. So because isha and a katan, there's no issue of hakafas harosh. Okay. Marzutra, masni lahashmaita de Shmuel la-seifa. Now, we're going to see Marzutra actually took Shmuel's statement and went ahead and put it on the Sefer. The Sefer was first to the later Mishnah. And we're going to see Nazir shaya tamei safek, b'samei tamei safek, umuchla b'safek. We actually quoted this in Sunday's daf. Right? This was the long Mishnah that we did not delve into on Sunday because we're going to do it in just a couple of days from now, which is the case where we'll say even Nazir, who was tamei b'safek, namely again, he's tamei. In other words, there's a safek if he's tamei tumas meis, and also a safek if he's a metzora. So what's talacha? Ochel bekachim la'achar shishim yom. He goes in and he eats kachim. He can eat kachim after 60 days. Umigaleach dalid taglachos. And he goes ahead and has to shave his head 4 times. V'haka avid akafa. Rabbi say, how can you just go ahead and have people shaving their head, right, just to satisfy a safek? Amar Shmuel be'isha v'katan. Shmuel says, what's the case? The case is by an isha and a katan. So Rabbi say, all Mar Zutra is doing is taking the qualification of Shmuel and applying it to a later Mishnah, which we will come to. Fine. So Rabbi say, so let's just establish what we have over here for just a moment. So Rabbi say, what do we have? Right? We've now established the case of the two Nazirim. Let's work backwards. Actually, let's work forwards. Right? Two Nazirim. Reuven sees them, and what does Reuven say? One of you is Tameh. By the way, now we've established where is Reuven geographically? Dalet Amas away, different Rishos. Therefore, again, because Reuven is not in close proximity, this keeps this as a case of Safek Toma Bershus Hayochid, which triggers the process. Shabbos said, what was step 1 of the process? Step one, wait 30 days. At the end of 30 days, what do? Shave the head. And once I shave the head, isn't that an Isur D'Oraisa Hakafa? And one of these people may not be Tameh. And therefore, Allah Lamaisa, one of these people may not be finished with their Neder Naziros. So how are you going ahead and just having them shave their head at the end of 30 days? So what's that qualification number 2 is Ish and Katan. So that's the case that Shnei Nazir over here of a woman and a Katan, neither of whom are prohibited to shave the corners of their head. I will say, by the way, that's fine. What doesn't it help us with? Right, if they're 2 men. So just want to point out, so in other words, sometimes like the Gemara backs into these answers and it's fine, like it makes the world like, saying, you know how like ever have a moment in life where like there's 2 minutes during the day where the universe is in perfect alignment? The answer is like, no, that never happens. No, there's like 90 seconds, right? 90 seconds, like, okay, everything is exactly as it should be. So that's kind of how you feel when Shmuel says this. Oh, it's an Isha and a Katan. We're like, oh, that's great, right? Right, it's great as long as it's an Isha and a Katan. Otherwise, what happens if it's not Isha? So, okay, we'll come to that. So let's say, let's go back there. So now, here we go. And I'll say, now we're going to go on a little bit of a detour. Because now that we mentioned an Isha and a Katan by a Kappa, let's talk about this a little bit. Amar Rafuna, Hamaki pes hakatan hariyu chayiv. So I will say this is very interesting. I will say if you cut off the payas of a child, That's the case. Makif is hakatan. You round out the corners of a child's head. Saloch lamaisa, you're chayiv. So Rav Huna holds your chayiv. Now look at the rush for just a moment. Hamakif es hakatan chayiv dichsev lo sakifu paas va'af paas katan bichlal. So I'll say this is very interesting. So Rav Huna's idea is like this. Rav Huna understands the Isha Doraisa of lo sakifu paas. There's a din in just rounding out the corners. In other words, even if it's someone who themselves is actually not chayiv in the halacha of payas, but the act of rounding out the corners, even of a katan, you're going to be chayiv. So we'll say this is actually fascinating. Amali Rav Adabar Ava Rav Huna, v'didach man negalach lahon. So Rav Adabar Ava says to Rav Huna, tell me, who cuts off the payas of your kids? So Rebbe say, what's very interesting is as follows. Take a look at the Rashi again. V'didach man megalach lahon shehayu regilin shelo l'shayer payos kishay megalchem rosh haktanim. So I'll say, apparently, this is fascinating. It was the style of Bizman Gemara to shave kids' heads. To shave kids' heads. Then I will say, by the way, there could have been also like hygienically a very good reason to do this because of lice. Because of lice. So I'll say, so again, so what's interesting is you have Rav Huna coming along and saying, you're not allowed to shave the head of a katan, and if you do so, it's an Isser D'Oraisa. And I will say, by the way, who is the Isser D'Oraisa on? Who's the Isser D'Oraisa on? It's on the barber, right? The barber, whoever's giving the kid a haircut. So this is Rav Huna. Rav Adabar Ava says, Rav Huna, one second, your kids have shaved heads. So who's cutting off the payas of your kids? Who's shaving the heads of your kids? Amrle Chova. Amrle Chova. So to which Rav Huna essentially says, my wife, she gives the kids haircuts. So Rav Adabar Ava says, so tik barinon chova libnei. Does chova want to bury her children? So essentially what Rav Adabar Ava says, I don't understand, but how is your wife allowed to do something that is prohibited? And how could she do something prohibited for her children? Take a look at Rashi, the Rashi, I'm sorry. Amar lechova, kach shem eishes Rav Huna, usfir le dafke isha makif esakatan chayiv, v'lo isha kidim efarisham b'osvach. I will say, now listen to this, so just to play this out. So you have Rav Huna saying, you're not allowed to cut off the payas of kids, right? Rav Adabar Ava says, but one second, Rav Huna, your kids don't have payas. So who's cutting off their payas? So Rav Huna responds, my wife. I will say, what's the pshat? So Rav Huna felt the only people prohibited to cut off payas are who? People who themselves are obligated in payas, namely men. But Lamaisa, women who do not have a din of payas, there's no problem for them to cut the payas of children. So therefore, Rav Huna says, listen, we've got this all figured out. In other words, so my wife is the one who gives the kids haircuts and shaves their heads. So Rav Adabar Ava says, Chas Shalom why? Rav Adabar Ava disagrees with this, as we're going to see, but the way he phrases his disagreement is very dramatic. Does Chova want to bury her children? Namely, does Chova want to do things that are asr for her children? Take a look at the Rush again. Chova tikbarnu lebnei. He wrote says shetikbar es banel. Shena yiras haonesh. Shena yiras haonesh ashi mekafes osam havi kishkaga shiyotzim lefnei hashal. So we'll say, so what happened over here? So Rav Adabar Ava felt that Allah Chalamayis Rav Huna was mistaken. That according to Rav Huna, if halacha l'maisa, if it indeed is usher to shave the payas of children, everyone should be prohibited to do so. But the way he phrased it was, does Chova want to bury her children? Does Chova want to do something that's usher for her children? So I'll say what happened. Tragically, Kulu Shani Rav Adabar Ava lo kaim le zari Rav Huna. All the days that Rav Adabar Ava was alive, Rav Huna's children did not survive. So we'll say, so this we run into this in Shas a number of different times about the power of the words of a tzaddik, right? The Rush frames it as kishkaga yosim ne'ashalit, like a mistaken word that comes out of the mouth of the ruler. So Rav Adabar Ava did not mean to curse Chova or to curse Rav Huna, but ultimately, again, the words of a tzaddik carry with them incredible power, which I will say is just, even if I'm not a tzaddik, the power of words, and the power of words just even uttered, just kind of like flippantly, or just even without complete regard. Words have power, and words have impact. And even if you don't mean them to have impact, words have impact. I will say it's incredible. It's overwhelming. So what happened? Michti. we'll say, let's analyze this a little bit. So we'll say, the Gemara, it's interesting. The Gemara doesn't really dwell on that piece. So the Gemara goes, let's analyze this. Tarvayu svira hakafas kalarosh ma kafa. So we'll say both. So obviously, there is a point of contention here between Rav Huna and Rav Ada bar Ava. So both of them agree that what? Hakafas kalarosh shma kafa. Both of them agree about say that a shaving of the entire head is usher. Now, we'll say this is important, right? Because Lamaisa, again, we saw this as a machlokes before. Namely, again, is the shaving of the entire head considered to be hakafa or not? So both both Rav Huna and Rav Ada bar Ava will agree that yes, shaving of the entire head is going to be usher. What's the machlokes? Here we go. Rav Huna savar lo sakipu paas roshechem. The pasuk says, "Do not round out the corners of your head." Roshchem, sorry. Lo sakifu paas roshchem, and furthermore, again, v'lo sashchis es paas zikanecha, and do not destroy the corners of your beard. Kol sheyesh lo ashchasa, yesh lo akafa. So we'll say, Rav Huna understands the juxtaposition to say, whoever has the prohibition to destroy their beard has the prohibition to destroy their payas. V'hani nashi ho v'lasnu b'ashchasa. Therefore, because women do not have the issue of destroying the beard, lesnu nami b'hakafa. They also do not have the prohibition to destroy payas. So that's Rav Huna's svar. That's why Rav Huna felt absolutely comfortable saying, my wife Chova could shave the head of the kids. Rav Ada bar Ava sav, on the other hand, Rav Ada bar Ava felt, so echad hamakif ve'echad hanikaf b'mashma. Rav Ada bar Ava said that halacha l'maisa again, both, I will say this is interesting, Rav Ada bar Ava said, when it comes to destroying payas, both the barber and the one receiving the haircut are both awesome. In other words, I will say, so whether you're getting your payas shaved or whether you're the one shaving the payas of another, both are usher. The iskish makif lenikaf and halacha lemaisa, we equate the barber with the what's the hair, the recipient, Barbie, right? The barber with the Barbie, right? Again, just doesn't sound right. Right? The person giving the haircut with the person receiving the haircut, and therefore kol heicha the nikaf mechayiv makif nami mechayiv. Wherever the nikaf, right? You must say ultimately again. Wherever the person receiving the haircut is asr, so to the person giving the haircut is asr as well. Therefore, we'll say, watch this. The high katan. Remember again, a katan, hoil v'hu gufei, lav bar onshin hu de mechayiv, makif nami lo mechayiv. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, by a katan, Rabbi say, a katan, since a katan is not going to be punished, right? A katan is not liable for anything. Therefore, the person cutting the hair of the katan won't be chayav. So we'll stop over for today. We'll pick up Emirat Hashem with this machlokes, because again, we're going to see there's some level of overlap with this machlokes as well. But again, Rav Ada bar Ava saying one more time, Rav Huna saying that halacha l'maisa, we equate destruction of payas with destruction of the beard. If you don't have a liability for destroying your beard, you don't have liability to destroying your payas, and therefore women are excluded. Rav Ada bar Ava saying no. Halacha l'maisa, where there's a connection ultimately again between the person getting the haircut and the person giving the haircut. If the person getting the haircut doesn't have liability, the person giving the haircut doesn't have liability. But if the person getting the haircut does have liability, the person receiving it does have as well. How to plug that back into the case before Rabbi Samir Hashem? Tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron on Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Shkoyach, everyone.